Our next presentation is by Dr. Steve O'Kane. Steve O'Kane is a professor of biology here at UNI, where he has been for 16 and a half years. He obtained his BS and MS at Colorado State University and a PhD in population and evolutionary biology at Washington University in St. Louis. His research focus is twofold: the floristics, or botany, of the western United States and molecular systems of the mustard family of plants. Here to deliver his talk, The Joys of Poor Design, Intelligent Design? Not, is Dr. Steve O'Kane.
Hey, holy cats, I got the wrong slide up there. There we go. Ouch. Some of you have probably heard me talk before, and you know that I'm never happier than when somebody interrupts me. So please interrupt with questions, comments. You can throw spit wads, you can do whatever you want. But if you want to interact, let's do it as I go along. Okay, so we're going to talk today about intelligent design. So I sat down and kind of thought about it. And I thought, I think there's probably two main pieces to what the intelligent design people are saying. The first is, when I look out at life, it's so well designed that it must have been designed by an intelligent mind. That's what I'm going to address today. There's a second piece to that sort of equation that says some things are irreducibly complex and therefore could not have evolved by natural processes. That would have to be a whole talk in itself, although after the talk I'd be happy to address any questions about that. So today's talk is pretty much about that first point. And let's kind of clarify that first point a little more. They say living things are too well designed to have originated by an evolutionary process that includes two really important things that are super important to us evolutionary biologists. Contingency, which means what came before matters. In other words, the past can constrain the present. The present can't be just anything. It depends on what came before. That's contingency. And randomness. Now, I often hear, I can't believe that everything evolved randomly. Well, I got news for you. It did not. There's a random component. That's called mutation. Okay? Mutations in DNA, yeah, that's, for all intents and purposes, that's random, at least with respect to the organism's needs. But beyond that, it's not random. Natural selection is not random. Okay? The one that survives is the one that can produce the most offspring into the future. Okay? Those are the two things they have trouble with. They have trouble with the past mattering and with having this large, random, undesigned component. So I want to look at these. I want to look at these this way. Basically, what I've just described, their position that I've just described is that whoever did the creating, and they get kind of wishy-washy about that, it could be aliens, but I think we know what they really think. That, I'll say it, deity or God, is a darn good engineer. A darn good engineer. In fact, in theory, a perfect engineer. Okay? Given that, I think we can kind of use some logic that looks something like this. An omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent creator God would create organisms that have optimal design. That is, God's a competent engineer. Fair enough? I hope I haven't misstated their position. Okay, let's buy that. Let's buy that argument. Organisms have features that are suboptimal. This is my assertion. That are suboptimal or even detrimental. That is, they are not competently designed. if they came about by, in fact, a celestial engineer. Therefore, and I have to prove this point, which is what I will do. Therefore, either, notice this is an either. A God did not create this organisms, or God is not at the same time omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. That is, He's not entirely competent. Notice, I'm not arguing for atheism here. I might be, that's choice A, but choice B is also possible. That there is a deity, but He's not a particularly good engineer. So let's take a look at some things. I'm going to kind of start with a couple of things that are kind of outside us, and then go back to that second slide of mine where the atom goes, ouch! But just a few things to kind of get us going. This is a dark-winged beetle. There's a bunch of these. They live in forest floors, mainly in the soil. So they spend a huge chunk of their time underground. And when they're not underground, they're roaming around underneath the leaf litter, underneath deciduous forests. They never fly. And it turns out that these two structures, these elytra, are fused down the middle line. Now, I bet you've all seen other kinds of beetles where you poke them, right, and those two elytra pop open, and then the wings are underneath, and off they go. These guys can't do that. Rather, it's believed these fused elytra are there, well, one of the purposes they serve is water conservation. In fact, there's some beetles related to these that have elaborate mechanisms of using this to gather water. Great! That sounds like a super good design to me. With one small hitch. Underneath these elytra are wings. There's wings under there. So, okay, the beetle's doing just fine. It seems to be very successful. It's got lots of species. It's abundant. But why would a good engineer put wings underneath those things that never get used? It's a difficult question to answer if one buys into intelligent design. For me, that doesn't seem particularly intelligent. It seems like a waste of stuff. Okay? I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but at least to me. Those are real. People are born with tails. And what I've read is some people can move them. I guess not all. Sometimes they're kind of more fleshy than bony. But I think these two ones are pretty bony. They can wag them. That doesn't seem very good if you're going to be a classical human being. So the question arises, why are genes for tails still in us? They are. All the genetic mechanisms, underlying mechanisms required to build a tail are present inside of us. Once in a while, like that, they get turned on. That's not the question. The question is, why the heck are they even there if you're a competent engineer? Here's a pretty interesting one. I may finish a little early today, but that's good. This is a very interesting one. Most folks don't know that there are 3 stages to a developing your developing kidneys. Here's stage 1, where this duct comes up here and forms this structure that can filter blood. That's called a protonephros. So that grows in the embryo. It is fully functional and then goes away. Is not used. And in its place, there's where it was, it degenerates. In its place is a mesonephros. That grows out of this area. And that's fully functional, but we don't use it, and it goes away. Until finally, the regular old kidney develops in the developing embryo. Now, there's good evolutionary reasons why this might happen. One might suspect, for instance, that these kinds of kidneys were used by our ancient ancestors that got modified over time. But is that intelligent design? You know, what if you contracted a building project and the engineer came back and said, okay, so here's what you got to do. You got to build building A, tear it down, build building B, and tear it down, and then, now you can build building C, the one you want. That seems fairly inefficient. Any questions, comments? Here's one, guys, that I'm sure you will appreciate. Something like in a typical, for human males, something like 30% of us will have an inguinal hernia sometime in our lives. You women you like that. You get other kinds of hernias. But we get these ones. The guys here all know what I'm talking about. When you go to, you go to the doc and you got it. But why is that the case? Well, it has to do with our ancient history. If we look at a shark, and sharks are among the very, very earliest of fish and are in our lineage, these sharks have their gonads up here, way up in the body cavity. And they work just fine because, think about it for a moment, sharks are not warm-blooded. Right? They're cold-blooded. So if we're going to make a warm-blooded critter, we need to get those gonads outside the body. Thanks a lot. And you all know what I'm talking about there. It's very well known that if your testicles are too warm, then you don't make as many sperm and they're not as active. You've got to get the testicles outside the body. So, there they are in you, men, right there, well up in the body as you're developing. And they then have to move down during embryo development. And check out what they got to do. They got to go through the perineal wall. Okay, that's the stuff down here inside you that's holding up your guts, and in my case, other stuff. They got to pierce that. They have to go through it. And they do. They pierce through it right there and pop through, and there they reside at this stage. Notice that little blip right there. It's weak. And then we look at a 9-month-old. Well, the testicles are outside the body now, and you have this weak structure through which a hernia can burst. Why not make the testicles start on the outside? I don't know why. I can explain it evolutionarily. Because way, way, way back, as we were evolving from things like sharks to bony fish to things like Tiktaalik and Acanthostega and amphibian-like things and reptile-like things and then mammal-like things, that those testicles were moving down, particularly as we got to be mammals and became warm-blooded. We can explain why the heck that happens evolutionarily. But how would one explain a good engineer doing that? I'd fire him on the spot. Thank you. I am not looking forward to having an inguinal hernia. I've lucked out so far. One of these days, I expect it. Here's an interesting thing. You'll just love this one. It's very much related to the last one. During development, your testes in the fetus are way up here, as we saw in the last slide. And as they descend, one descends like this, and the other one goes, oops. And then rather than going in front of the ureter, that's the tube that leads from your kidneys to where it goes out of your body, instead of going in front of that, it loops behind it and travels down like that. What's all this stuff? What's all this stuff about? Why would a designer do that when this would be so much better? See, that's not what we actually are. Wouldn't that be a heck of a lot better? Just go right where it needs to go. Rather, it takes this long, torturous detour. Doesn't look so good. Oops, sorry about that. Thought I took it out. That's a real fig leaf, by the way. Which reminds me, you know why they use fig leaves? Because some kinds of figs look remarkably similar to the external genitalia of females. That's why it appeared in all that early stuff. If you're going to cover up a fig, you cover it up with the fig's leaf. So, at any rate, here is something, guys. You ladies are lucky. Guys, you love this. I know you do. This little guy there. The prostate. Oh, I see a rubber glove anymore. I'm like, oh, God! No, not that. Here's another sad piece. All of us, as we age, our prostates enlarge. And guess what goes right smack dab through the middle of the prostate? Right? That urethra. Right smack dab through the middle of the prostate. And the prostate's enlarging. And as you get older, guys, not in agreement, it gets a little harder to wee-wee. And not only that, well, this is an aside, that thing is extremely prone to cancer. But that's not what the point I want to make. Why would an engineer put a tube through an organ that engineer knew would expand as the organism aged? That doesn't seem like competent design to me. Here's a fun one. This, I have to explain it a little bit, is a little piece of the retina, the back of the eye, of an octopus. And it's very interesting. These guys here, I'm not sure if these are rods or cones, but they're both there in reality. These are the light receptive cells. Okay? And down here, and back here's the brain. Brain's down here. So that's the back of the eye. These are I'm losing my light here. These are nerves that come out of the receptive rods and cones, pass through the back of the eye, into the optic nerve, and off to the brain. That's cool. If for no other reason, it's cool because it kind of glues the retina against the back of the eye. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay? And furthermore, there's nothing up here to block the light coming through. Right? The light goes through the eye. First thing it hits are the receptive cones and rods. That's not what we have. We have this interesting arrangement. There's the cones and rods. Does I see a hand? No. There's the retina. There's the back of the eye. Here's the light coming in. These are the nerves and other cells, and this is vastly oversimplified. And there's the nerves taking off, running across the retina, over to the blind spot, and they dive through the eye and go to the brain. So a couple things, 3 things happen. 1, you've got a blind spot. I'm sure you've all, it's somewhere or another demonstrate that if you close one eye and look straight ahead, that eventually it goes away. You can't see it. I wonder how many accidents that's caused. The second problem is this thing, because these are real narrow nerve-like cells, because these don't go through the back of the eye, the retina has a very strong tendency in people to rip loose, not just people, but mammals. Okay? You fall down on the floor, hit your head real hard like that, you might pop off your retina. Not good. Happens all the time. Third, look what the light has to do. It has to pass through all these nerve fibers as well as these non-receptive cells before it ever gets to the rods and cones. Now, I do spend a lot of time, way more than it's probably healthy for me, looking at creationist websites. And they point to a paper, a fairly recent paper, where a couple of researchers looked at the behavior of these cells. And it turns out that those cells do, in fact, help light to focus down to the retina. Okay, so end of story, right? See, the designer knew what he was doing. That's not the end of the story. It would be better to be like that. Better. This is a workaround. Okay, got it? So those cells help, but it's still a workaround. It'd be better than not to be like an octopus eye. So octopi have gooder designed eyes than we do. That doesn't seem very intelligent. This one's a fun one. That's a shark. I'll tell you right off the bat that the heart of this shark lies right about there. Okay? But what you are looking at are cranial nerves. And in particular, I want you to look at the vagus nerve. That's this nerve right there. You follow it down, and it branches there. See it? Branches there and goes this way and that way. Okay, here's the story, gang. This one feeds the heart and other things. That one feeds some stuff up in here. I'm not a fish biologist. I'm going to call it stuff. It feeds some stuff up here. Well, that stuff became our larynx, our voice box. Okay, so you got the picture? Notice another thing about the shark. Sharks don't, despite what you might think, they don't have heads. Right? They don't have a pretty closed structure and a neck. Fish don't have necks. Okay? They can't do that. It doesn't narrow down here and it's not flexible. Okay? And furthermore, our hearts are in this part. Right? Not here. Our hearts are down here. So what that means is the heart has to move down through evolution. And when it does, it causes that vagus nerve, one branch of which we now call the laryngeal nerve. Sharks don't have a larynx. Check it out. The nerve originates in the brain, runs clear down here, under an arch of the aorta, and clear back up there to feed the larynx. Good design? Not very good design. How about if you were a Supersaurus? I didn't make that up. That's a real dinosaur. That nerve would have to be 28 meters long. That's pretty big. Incidentally, look at us. Comes down from the brain. There's that split junction. Remember that? Comes down from the brain, curves around the aorta, and goes over there. All right. Creationist websites. Yeah, but it's called a recurrent laryngeal nerve, also feeds into a few little, not much, but a few things over here. So it's not completely without function. God must have known what he was talking about. I still say, why not go straight from the brain to there? But that brings me to this. I have a job for it. See if any of you can do this. I'm a person, each of you is an engineer. Actually, you're an architect. Okay? And I come to you and say, here's what I want you to do. I want you to design me a house, but I have the following criteria. The rooms have to be square. The walls have to be flat, of course, if it's a square. The ceiling has to be flat. And the house, it's in Iowa, has to shed snow. Okay? I'm looking for a kindergarten version drawing of a house here. Okay? Can anybody solve this problem for me? I'm not going to call on that. I think I told them the answer.
I can put my kids on the roof.
Oh, they can shovel the snow off. Put it on a hill?
Build the whole thing on, like, at a 45-degree angle, so the corner's on the ground.
So you'd have to live down there in the corner? I want a good house. Yeah.
Put a triangle on top?
Put a triangle on top. Oh, I left something. Shame on me. I left a fifth criterion off. I refuse to pay for an attic. Okay, that was kind of an important one to leave off. I will not pay for an attic. I'm a cheapskate.
Dome shape, outside extra space for storage.
My ceiling's got to be flat.
So it's got to be flat.
Can you do it? Probably not. So yeah, go ahead.
This is really far-fetched, but have a stainless steel ceiling and have your house really heated. You're going to have a crazy electric bill.
I love that, although I didn't say melt snow, I said shed it.
Windshield wipers.
Big windshield wipers on top. You know what? I have seen one solution, only one, and it just came this year. I present this to students. And it's pretty ingenious, but I'll get to that in a minute. Here's as good as you can do. You can't do any better than that. Okay? Everybody agree? You can't. And guess what I ended up with? I got a vote for an attic. No, I didn't. I ended up with something I don't want. It's not an attic. There's nothing in it. I don't want it. It's a byproduct. If natural selection is going to work on an organism and build a structure that, in this house organism, sheds snow, then I get an attic for free. Does that make sense? The attics, listen carefully, that attic is not for anything. Not for anything. It's a byproduct. Now, given that it's there, I can store stuff. I can use it. This is really common in evolution. For a feature to pop up because of some other feature, and then it gets used. Okay? Makes sense. Wow, that was long-winded, and it's supposed to go back to that idea about the recurrent laryngeal nerve also serving some other minor functions. If the nerve's there, use it. Make sense? Here's the solution. One of my students last fall. It works. Dig it into a hill. Nature didn't find that solution. Too bad. How am I doing? Oh, what, Corey, do I have till 10 to?
About a quarter till 10, so it'd be nice to get some Q&A in there.
I know I plan to, but maybe I'll just cut some stuff out here in a minute. I want to talk about DNA a little bit. And, wow, that's boring, in fact. This is only a partial amino acid sequence of a protein called CAT-T1R2 gene. And I say partial because notice I'm starting at about 300 base pairs that aren't on this slide, in which cats, dogs, humans, mice, rats, mouse, rat, well, two different versions of the gene, all match up. And then cats have what's called a frame shift mutation right there, which makes the amino acids change. And then, to make matters worse, all of the DNA information that leads to these amino acids is gone. Cats cannot taste sweet. That's why your cat won't eat candy, at least most cats. They can't taste sweet. But the question remains, why are there, what would that be? I don't know, about 50. Why would there be 350 amino acids still there? Was the designer so stupid that he said, well, I'm going to remove the last half of the gene and leave the first half there? Not smart. Here's a lovely one. Scurvy. You and certain other primates, chimps, bonobos, gorillas, and old world monkeys, cannot make vitamin C. Okay? As well as two other kinds of creatures. Guinea pigs and fruit bats. Okay? Just so happens that none of those creatures can make vitamin C. And here's some sequence. This is another name for that gene. Or this is the name of the gene. If we compare rat, human, chimpanzee, orangutan, and guinea pig, oops, I goofed. I have to go back to New World monkeys and orangutans. Notice what they share in common, right? They share, whoops, that one, that one, that one, that one. They share the identical errors. Identical. And furthermore, if I compare chimps to us, we share those identical errors, and all three of us share that what's called a deletion. There's a whole DNA base gone, missing. Okay? Why, if I'm a good designer, why would I do something like that? Why would I make it look just like we and our relatives lack the gene? I need to say something about fruit bats and guinea pigs. They have different mutations. It was a completely separate event in evolutionary history. Why would we share those differences if we didn't evolve and carry this genetic baggage with us? And it is baggage. Thought experiment. Is the fact that you can't make vitamin C a genetic disease? Do you all have a genetic disease? If you live in the tropics, there's fruit everywhere. You don't have a genetic disease, do you? What if you live in north central Canada? You've got a genetic disease. You can't get enough vitamin C. shouldn't go off on that tangent. That all that says is that whether something's good or bad is entirely context dependent. I think I have one more example. Yeah. There's these things called human endogenous retroviruses. Yikes. You might not know it, but when you get the flu, that's an RNA virus. The virus gets into your cells. Its genetic material is RNA, not DNA. And it tells your cell to turn it into DNA, and it can insert right into your chromosomes at random spots. Random spots, that's a retrovirus. Okay? And when you're over the flu, when you've gotten over it, guess what's often left behind? Chunks of viral DNA jammed into your DNA. That makes sense for everybody? In fact, I think Teresa would know better than I would. I believe I recently read something like 80% of our genome is made of these.
50, 45?
Yeah, a huge amount. You know, something like half of all your DNA is old, dead virus. But what the heck is with this? If I look at us, bonobos, chimps, and gorillas, and old world monkeys, we all have that retrovirus in the exact same place in our DNA. Which means this. Notice New World monkeys don't have it. It evolved so it infected our lineage there. And we all inherited it. All of us. There's a hypothesis I give you. Pretty well supported. As opposed to a different hypothesis that says that God stuck it individually in all of those things. Why? Why would he stick an old dead retrovirus in the exact same spot in your chromosome in all these guys? Doesn't make sense. It's not very good design. So I'm just about done. So let's revisit my little logical sequence. An omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent creator God would create organisms that have optimal design. That is, the designer was competent. I argue organisms have features that are suboptimal or even detrimental. They're not competently designed. Therefore, one of two things. No, there isn't a God, or the God's not competent. In other words, the designer is more like that one. That's it.
All right, we do have time for a few questions.
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to say, I think you presented some very interesting examples, and I think that one of the most interesting aspects of the whole thing is when you look at comparative embryology, and look at just simply Haeckel's principle on how you display progeny, you can see that if you look at that in all kinds of specimens, how you go through the evolutionary history.
Yes.
So you wouldn't expect that there'd be any real reason for that in terms of the design.
Absolutely. A lot of, again, I'm a weirdo and I visit these creationist websites. A huge proportion of their arguments have to do with fossils. There's always some gap, right? Yeah. What they don't realize is that Darwin had virtually no fossils and came up with that theory by observation and in very large part by looking at embryology. You know, it's often said in modern evolution books, we would have come up with the identical theory with no fossils. So we're lucky to have a few. I want to say one more thing about fossils. This is something you should watch for on their websites. Okay, it used to be we had some lobe-finned fish, okay, and we had this creature called a Canthostega. right? This one is a very, very, very early tetrapod. The limbs are not very well formed, but they're there. These are way early, and there was nothing in between. Okay? So you can imagine what, if we just go back 10 years, what the website said. It didn't evolve. There's a gap there. You can't demonstrate it. Well, we found Tiktaalik. So now we have a Acanthostega and some certain types of bony fish, and right in between, boink, is Tiktaalik. Guess what the websites say now? There's 2 gaps. Okay, so I got this one, and this one. What if I find that one? 3 gaps, and I find this one. It's getting worse for us. The more evidence we have, the worse it gets. Not a very good argument. Yeah.
I know that you're very schooled in the science and so forth, but just in a practical situation, say for example in public schools, in your experience, from what you've seen, what is the best way to respond to the creationist tactic of, quote, teach the controversy, quote?
I'm going to try something here. And my students, I have a few students in the audience. I know you're a teaching major. What are you going to do?
I won't teach it.
Not teach it?
I won't teach intelligent design.
Oh, no. He was wondering, how do you go about teaching?
What the creationists have come up with, and I saw it when I lived in Spencer. There was a concerted effort a couple of years ago to get intelligent design into the school being taught there. What they basically did is some of the conservative churches managed to get the balance of the school board where they could push that through. And we ended up getting, there's an excellent video called Judgment Day. But the strategy that they use is really the same strategy as global warming, is if you have an immense amount of evidence on one side and a few people on the other. Well, to be fair, and so forth, and to be human, we need to give both sides their say, and we need to, quote, teach the controversy. What it is, it's a way to torpedo science. And so how do you respond to that?
I'll tell you how I personally respond to it, and it's, fortunately for me, I teach at a university. Mm-hmm. My response here at the university is, and we as the biology department, about 10 years ago or so, decided we've had enough. No more lollygagging around, no more beating around the bushes, no more using gradual change rather than the word evolution. Here it is, and it's in every class. You can't take it, I think I'm right, you can't take a biology class without it being based on evolution. Unabashed. You just do it. Now, I can't really answer your question because I'm not living somewhere where my neighbors are going to shun me or kick me out of their churches. Or I had a student who went to a little town, I can't recall its name, but somewhere east of Des Moines, and they, honest to Pete people, they ran it out of town.
Well, from a legal perspective, what the gentleman is saying up there is true. They're using the courts, of course, to try to say that there has to be a fair and balanced presentation. Exactly. Unfortunately, I think the courts have kind of got suckered into that. I think the whole thing misunderstands, intentionally or unintentionally, the whole scientific enterprise. If they don't like Darwinism, that's fine. If you don't like the scientific theory, disprove it. That's the whole point of it.
Amen.
But that isn't, the courts are being sucked into this idea of fair and balanced. And if you have something like intelligent design, in my opinion anyway, we look at it from a legal perspective, and you can't prove it's true or false, to me it falls into the category of being, at least in a public sense, meaningless. Why should you support with your public dollars a theory that basically is meaningless? I'm not saying it's true or false. Where's your evidence? It's just basically meaningless. And if you're going to try to use the courts, they're using legal tactics in something that should be put into a scientific framework by people, I would expect, judges and policymakers that have some understanding of what science is all about. That's fine, destroy Darwin, and go out and destroy him, show me the evidence.
One quick comment about that. We've heard the point made twice now, that there's this huge, massive evidence, and 99.99% of scientists, and then there's these other folks. When we're talking about intelligent design, those other folks who are practicing science are literally a handful of people at the Discovery Institute. That's it.
Yeah.
I think yours was for, sorry, Bob, I'll get you next.
I just had a question about the whole difference, how like the human male FSUs that have to drop down, go around all this stuff, and all gets in the way. And like, are there ever like recorded mutations where like it does come down the right way or like the more intelligent way?
No, there's not. And the reason why not is way back at the beginning of my talk, the word contingency. All of the developmental processes are built around its traveling down. You can't just not do those other steps. It will disrupt other things. So we're locked in.
Yeah. Ken, I had the luxury of teaching at the university, but I did teach evolutionary biology for 25 years here. And I taught creationism. I put it up there as a testable hypothesis. We looked at what it said and falsified it. Same way Steve just falsified intelligent design. I don't know if that's going to work in a high school, but I put it right up there and say, it doesn't work.
In a high school, the teaching creationism is done with a loaded deck. That's the difference.
Do I understand?
And I would add, Johnny comes home from school and says, teacher walked us through how creation is not true.
Yes.
And distinguish between creationism and a creator. And very distinct. One more.
Got one more question. Yeah.
I was just going to add to his question back there. How do you justify that by putting that straight down that will work better?
I did not say it would work better. Well, no, in a sense it would. We'd have a heck of a lot less hernias. So in that sense it would work better. What I said was it was poor design. Because why do all that stuff when you can just go from here to there? There is a negative piece to that, and that's the hernia. Am I allowed? I think I'm done.
Okay, well then everyone help me give Dr. Kane a thank you.